Question 5, the Hon Barbara Edmonds.
Malole sui formanwea, Mr Speaker. To the Minister for Social Development and Employment, does she stand by the Minister of Finance statement that, quote, our priority areas will continue to be hard-working, everyday New Zealanders and the frontline services like health, education and police you rely on, unquote? If so, what is the government doing to support community-led services?
The Honourable Louise Upston.
Mr Speaker, yes, our government's priority has always been everyday Kiwis and frontline services, which is why we have prioritised funding for the frontline instead of unnecessary bureaucracy. The government also supports many community-led services across a range of portfolios, including social development and employment.
Supplementary. Why is the government saying that New Zealand not-for-profits make a significant contribution to the community when the Minister of Finance is actively looking to tax them on membership subscriptions that help run their services?
Mr Speaker, in terms of my responsibility as the Minister of Social Development and Employment, many of the not-for-profit services provide wonderful services on the ground, and it is important that when government is funding those organisations, we know they're well run and that the public has confidence in them.
Supplementary. What should local returned servicemen associations, or RSAs, do who could face higher taxes, increasing membership fees and thereby reducing support for veterans?
Mr Speaker, as the Minister of Social Development and Employment, I don't have responsibility for revenue and tax measures.
Point of order, the Honourable Karen McAnulty.
So this question was transferred from the Minister of Finance to the Minister of Social Development and Employment. She is not answering on behalf of, which is a slightly different issue to the one we have here. Speaker's rulings are quite clear that if a government chooses to transfer a question, then that minister is expected to be in a position to answer supplementaries.
Up to a point. The question is transferred to the Minister for Social Development and Employment, and that is the breadth of portfolio responsibility that can be answered in this question.
Order, sir.
It cannot simply be the case. The government cannot narrow the range of potential supplementary questions to a question lodged by the opposition simply by transferring it to a minister who doesn't have the full breadth of responsibility for the question that was asked.
Well, the point is that the decision is made based on the primary question which is asked, which is, does the minister agree with the statement made by the Minister of Finance? The answer to that was clearly given. The idea that then the minister should know everything that the Minister of Finance knows is not reasonable.
You'll find, Mr Speaker, that the supplementary question that was just asked, bearing in mind that this question has been reworded, it was not lodged as written on the sheet now, it was a direct quote from the Minister of Finance being asked of the Minister of Finance, and the second part of the question is about government support to community-led services. The question that my colleague Barbara Edmonds has just asked is directly related to a matter that the Minister of Finance is currently consulting, or was one of the ministers currently consulting on, that will have a direct impact on community-led services. It is absolutely in scope of the question as asked, and the government shouldn't be able to narrow the scope of the question as asked by transferring it to a minister who doesn't have responsibility for it.
Well, the government didn't necessarily do that. It was my decision that the question had been answered. But we'll just not get into the pedantics of an argument. Ask the question again. I'm sure it's quite easily answered.
Supplementary. What should local returned servicemen associations, RSAs, do who could face higher taxes, increasing membership fees and thereby reducing support for veterans?
Mr Speaker, as the Minister of Social Development and Employment, when there are discussion documents that the government puts out, I encourage people to submit appropriately.
Supplementary. What should local vegetable community co-ops that provide cheap vegetables to everyday New Zealanders do who could be taxed more and may have to close their operations?
Mr Speaker, our government is very clear about the value that community organisations provide to the government when the government provides and purchases services from such organisations. But where there are discussion documents, even if issued by a different member of minister in our government, I'd encourage people to submit.
Supplementary. How much revenue does the government expect to rake in from the proposed tax on RSAs, working men's clubs, Lions clubs, Rotary clubs, vegetable community co-ops, credit unions, friendly societies and other not-for-profit organisations?
Mr Speaker, as I said in my answer to the first supplementary question, it is really important that the New Zealand public have confidence in the not-for-profit sector and charitable organisations, especially when those organisations are funded by central government using their tax. So it is important that we have a system where it is clear that those who should pay tax are, and that charities are robust and acting with integrity.
Supplementary. Why is the government looking at hiking taxes on 9,000 not-for-profit organisations while handling a $2.9 billion tax cut to landlords?
Mr Speaker, speaking on behalf in my area of social development and employment, I think I've been clear about why it is important that when taxpayers' money goes into service provision, we need to ensure that those who should pay tax are, and that people can have confidence in the not-for-profit sector when they are delivering services to New Zealanders. And as I would say, where there are discussion documents out for consultation, they are just that. We want to consult, we want to listen to what people have to say.
Point of order, the Honourable Karen McAnulty.
Thank you very much. There's been a few instances recently where a question directed to a minister is referring to a direct quote from the intended minister. It's subsequently been transferred, which we don't dispute, that is the government's right. But when it is specifically a direct quote from the intended minister, it has caused some problems. Would you at least reflect on that particular type of question and whether it is appropriate to transfer instead of just getting a minister to reply on behalf of the minister if they, in an instance where they might not be available?
I'll do that.